Welcome back to the Pursuit of Progress podcast. I'm Benjamin Adams with my co host Adam Lang. And today we are going to talk about why and who you spend your time with is one of the biggest predictors of your future and how you can upgrade your circle with intention. Now, you've probably heard the saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. What if I told you that people around you are either pulling you forward or holding you back? Today, we're diving into the power of proximity, how the right environment can 10x your life, and how the wrong one can keep you stuck forever and ever and ever. Adam, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be back on another episode with you. This is definitely something we've talked about on a few prior episodes. I know in
Yeah.
season 1 we had a couple, and the one that kind of jumps out at me that I was just thinking about is we did an episode titled Propellers and Anchors, and it's this idea
Yeah.
of just the people you surround yourself with. You don't have to be quite as, black and white, where some people might not be totally one or the other, but just kind of using that as a framework. You have people that are anchors, you have people that are propellers. Propellers are people that drive you forward, they help push you in the right direction. An anchor, on the other hand, is heavy. It kind of ties you down, it weighs you down, it maybe potentially keeps you from moving forward. And
You
this is
back.
kind of, yeah, holds you back. And that same idea of just proximity to the people that
Mhm.
hopefully are in your inner circle. And if they're not yet, at least you're being intentional to put them in your circle in the future.
Yeah, that's so great. I love the title of this week's podcast, Power in Proximity, because this is a big belief that I have. And you've heard me reference my kids a lot on this podcast before. And, they're in high school. They're very, peers are very important with them. And they're learning this lesson too. Just let me say that. My son at times he's allowed some of the wrong people into his life. And guess what? When that happens, all of a sudden he's going down a different path. He's making the wrong decisions. He's doing the wrong things. He's getting into trouble, and a lot of that has to do with who he's hanging out with. My daughter, and I also say this: when we're younger, our proximity circle is a lot less about values, beliefs, goals. A lot of times it's just about how close you live to someone and who's in your class. And a lot of our friends growing up are just because of proximity, not because of the power in the proximity, just because we went to first grade together. And so now we're friends. But, as they've gotten older, there's a couple of friends my daughter has. I'm like, do you guys have the same goals? Do you have the same interests? Are you, the same values? Do you have the same motivations? Are you going after the same things? And there's a couple of her friends, like there's just no common ground, but yet you're giving all of your time to this person. And so kind of learning some of those lessons in a little bit of a different way, same thing, propellers or anchors. And so I think that's when you start to be a little bit more aware of the power and proximity and peer group is kind of that high school age, but it doesn't end there.
I'm just thinking too about how when we were in high school 20 plus years ago at this point, we didn't have social media, we didn't have cell phones. We were even more limited to just like you're saying, the people that literally were in our proximity where they lived, the neighbors
Yeah.
down the street type scenario. Just think of how different it must be now, though, where, kids are able to still connect through social media and other ways. Hopefully there's not quite as much of that effect with the physical location, but it's still an
Yeah,
issue
and
for sure.
I always say I just feel like we're putting kids at such a disadvantage with some of the social media stuff. We're
Mm-hmm.
giving them access to all of these tools, all of these resources, things that they're not mature enough for, they're not ready for. They haven't developed. How do I navigate this thing in my hand and be responsible with it? We're giving it to them. There's no supervision, and that's another thing. It's like, who are you allowing online or in your social media feed to influence you? And on my Instagram account, what I've done is I really curated that. And so I only have positive things. I only have role models, mentors, real estate, business, mortgage, personal growth. Love Jim Rohn. He's not around, but he has so many insightful, valuable videos. I'm a student of his. And that's what's great when social media is used in the right way. Like, even though I've never met any of these people face to face, like they are still part of my circle.
Yeah, they're in your proximity.
Yeah.
Well, your man, Jim Rohn, he had a really good quote that I wanted to share with you guys. Pretty famous quote here. If you hang around 5 broke people, you'll be the 6th. And that is a very true statement.
Yeah, and it's oh my gosh, yeah. And if you hang around 5 millionaires, you'll be the 6th.
Yeah, I think that's a better, more productive, optimistic one to do. Yeah.
But it's so true. And That, a couple podcasts ago, I shared my story as far as just getting into origination and going and sitting by the number one originator in the state of Colorado at the time, and that was why I wanted to be in close proximity to the best. See how he moves, see how he behaves. What is his tone like on the phone? How is he interacting? What kind of clients is he taking on? And just because I believed that just by me being in close proximity, his success would just kind of naturally just drip onto me. And if I'm close enough, like those drops, like they're just going to fall onto me. I don't even have to do anything. And that's exactly what happened.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely the proximity of who you're around, and you just start to to subconsciously really soak in that energy that they have, whether that be positive or negative, even like the risk tolerance of how they're acting, language, behavior, all that stuff, just from having that proximity. That's cool.
It's funny that you mentioned the language thing too, right there. Like, hey, do you have any friends or maybe family members how, maybe they talk a certain way or they use certain adjectives or verbs to describe, and then when you're around them, all of a sudden you're talking a little bit different because you're mimicking how they talk. Have you ever experienced that before?
Yeah, a
Or
little
maybe
bit.
even like the dialogue or the things that you're talking about, or maybe, maybe you're a little bit more, if you have a family member and they're a Debbie Downer a little bit more, and well, I this is this person likes to talk like this. I'm gonna bring up a negative topic where I wouldn't do that. It's not my character, but I know that this is how this person is. So now I'm gonna go negative. And if you have enough conversations like that, all of a sudden you can go negative for a longer stretch or maybe even permanently.
Yeah, I think just talking through some kind of personal stories of how we've been intentional about this. One for me was maybe 10 years ago. I was real, purposefully seeking out a kind of a group mentorship type program. And I found a group called EO, Entrepreneur Organization. They've got chapters all over the world, but the one in Denver was appealing to me. So I, joined that and was with that for about 5 years. And, you're just surrounding yourself to be an EO. You have to qualify. You have to have a business that does over 1 million a year in sales, and just different like they kind of force the pool of people to be pretty small, and everybody can learn from each other and has different values and value add to provide each other. And it's just that to a T of what we're talking about today, just that proximity, and how even just in a couple of years, some of the new doors that were open for me and opportunities that came out of that just in a short period of a couple of years.
I have a group that I go to still to this day, and it's all the way out in like North Thornton. So from where I live, it's like a 40-minute drive. And it's the same thing. It's probably not at the same scale that yours was, but it's a entrepreneur based networking group. But I just enjoy being around these people. I enjoy being around other entrepreneurs, kind of what you just said. We get to learn from each other. And there's also a certain like element when you're in the same room with others that really understand like the challenges that you're going through and the risks that you're taking just by being an entrepreneur. It's like this person gets it. They know what I'm going through. They're trying to build a business where maybe the person that is, living comfortably on the salary, not really challenging themselves or pushing themselves to the same degree, there's a little bit of a different element there. So they're not going to understand what it's like to feel some of that pressure month after month and questioning yourself at times and maybe having some sleepless nights. And did we all have those? I mean, this mortgage market over the last couple of years has been so up and down. And, even in like months, like, 1 month I can be on the mountaintop. And then like the next month, I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, like what is going on? Do I got anything lined up? What do my next 90 days look like? And that's what it's like though to be. And so you want to make sure though that when you're around, because it's really easy to have some negative self-talk or have negative talk with your customers. And so just having that positive peer influence and being around people that know what it's like, so important.
Yeah, the only other thing I'll add to that is I was always so relieved when I was going to these monthly meetings, just because if you're an entrepreneur, a lot of these challenges you're facing, just the normal people that are around you just can't really relate to them. And it's just nice to have that group that you can kind of just connect at a different level with some of the struggles and frustrations and successes, but all that stuff just is nice to have other people that kind of get you. They're part of your tribe when it comes to the entrepreneurial stuff.
Yeah, I remember some of the things that you shared with me when you were running Aspen Tan, as far as just like monthly revenue that you needed to hit to be profitable or make that first dollar. And it's like when you have those conversations with someone that's just on an hourly, I mean, on an hourly rate or a salary, they're not going to have any idea what that means or what that feels like. And I've always said that I don't, a lot of the stuff that I do, like the people that I actually open up to about that stuff, is very select. And it's not, I love talking real estate, finances, personal finance. I'm very passionate about that. But I feel sometimes like if I'm sharing that stuff with the wrong person, number one, they're not going to understand. And number two, it's like that could almost be a turnoff for them. Or it could be like just like misinterpreted, and so that's why and you want to have these conversations though, because they are important, and it's good to kind of get it off your chest or talk through these things, the problems that you're seeing, or what's the market looking like.
Hmm.
Really being able to collaborate in a way that's a little bit different. And I would put you in that category. For me, my brother is another one of those. He's, we have a lot of the same interests, we do a lot of the same investing, and so he's someone I can call really at any moment and just like bounce something off of. And and we also kind of hold each other accountable to a degree in certain ways, different ways. If we're spending on something, have we asked ourselves those questions? Where is this going? Why am I doing this? What is the end objective? What is the 5 year, 10 year time horizon?
Hmm. Let's kind of move on and talk a little bit about, for maybe people that are, wanting to upgrade their proximity circle, just kind of be more intentional about who is in that circle, just some tips on how to make that happen. So I think, the first one is just doing as an audit. So an audit is just kind of an evaluation of who currently is in that circle. You can think of it as this 5 person people that are that are around you the most, or you can also think of it as more of a anchors and propellers type. But just basically identifying, who in your life really makes you feel like anything's possible, and who's really motivating you, who's supporting you regardless of how crazy of a thought or an idea you might have. And then also who subtly maybe is making you shrink your goals. A lot of times this ends up being family members, unfortunately. And a lot of times this is out of good intention. They're worried about you. They don't want you to fail in their mind. But, a lot of times it's family members that are actually the ones that are silently kind of negatively, affecting this motivation you might be having.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's like the people that care about you the most, and this is what I've learned, that it's not that they're trying to keep you small, but when they hold you back and they say those negative things, and they become an anchor on you, what they're doing is projecting their personal views of themselves and what they're capable of onto you. And so when you are the young person that has the big goals and the big dreams, and then you have that aunt or that uncle or whoever in your family, and they're questioning you, maybe they're really condescending. Why did you take out that student loan, or why did you go do this, or spend your 20s doing this? It's probably because they have some regret, and they have limited beliefs on who they are and what they can accomplish. Dude, I just think that all of us are here for a reason. And I think that all of us, every single person on this earth, has an incredible purpose, an incredible reason. And so few of us, though, actually get to ever discover what that is and identify it, and just live it, Because we're so we're so afraid to let go of the relationship, or so afraid of the opinion of others. So it's not
Yeah.
easy, though. It's not easy to let to I mean, we all struggle with that. I would say I'm a little bit more aware of that stuff now when that kind of comes across my path, but actually like letting go sometimes or making changes. Like I'll say this: I feel like I'm in a little bit of a rut with my career right now. I'm working from home a little, really exclusively now, and I used to be in the bank branch every single day. I like getting into the branch because I feel like I'm more productive on the phone. It's easier to make calls. I get to be around other people. I'm feeling that energy. There's an element of just kind of networking, connecting just by being present with other people. And like right now, like I never get that. But at the same time, I'm not really getting out as much. And so I kind of feel like maybe unintentionally, after our last week's podcast, am I staying in my comfort zone a little bit too much there? Do I need to get out and kind of force myself to just get out more on my own? And it's like kind of that support system I had with the bank is gone. It's like it's just me now. And so now it really is like up to me. Like I am the only one left.
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of that, for a lot of you guys, I'm in this category too. I was for a long time. Is You might be really intentional about surrounding yourself with 5 people that are really, above you in some aspect of life, somebody that you're looking up to. Sometimes it's hard to even find 5 people like that, especially if it's a physical, personal type relationship where you actually are in, the same presence of them. It's different to have mentors online and people that maybe you're following on social media, but you don't have this direct, personal type connection. To have 5 of those that are in your direct proximity, that's sometimes tough. So just don't kind of get, a little bit beaten down by that. Just understand that it does take time sometimes. And it can be a little bit lonely
Yeah,
is another way to look at
it does
this.
take time, and then let me add to that where it's like you gotta go to the places that those people are. So if you don't have those relationships or those connections, like where do you find those people? Well, figure out where those people hang out and where they network. Maybe it's a breakfast spot. If you're looking to get into, like, that's why I love our gym. There's just so much happening there. You have so many people that are serious about their fitness, about bettering themselves, but there's also just a lot of entrepreneurs and just really interesting people there. And so for me, it's like you never know what kind of conversation you're going to have at that gym at Armbrust. You never know who you're going to run into. I mean, we've run into celebrities. We've run into Denver Nuggets there. We've run into movie stars all at our gym.
Yeah. So that's the second of these kind of, again, guys, we're going through kind of 3 steps here. Number one was doing that self audit, auditing the circle. Number two is what Ben just said, finding rooms that stretch you. So just putting yourself in those environments. A good quote here that I love is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Just kind of keeping that in
Yeah.
mind. And then again, it doesn't have to be physical proximity. Following high level people online is still okay, but you do want to at least have a few people that are direct personal type relationships, in my opinion.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then,
I agree with all of that. And I mean, like you said, it's something that you got to be intentional with. You got to be intentional with all this stuff because if you're not intentional, you just you let off the gas pedal and you just start existing and living. And you got to really audit yourself every, I don't know, every month, every 2 weeks. For example, I'm normally reading 2 books at once, and I finished I have a morning book that I read, which is a little bit more self help, and then I have an evening book that I read, which is more biography focused. I call that my pleasure reading. Right now, I'm reading the biography of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I finished my self help book, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to start a new book next week. Well, all of a sudden, it's been like 3 weeks and I haven't started anything, and it's like, hello, just because I've gotten taken some of that intensity, that energy off.
yeah, I love, this the science behind this too. I was reading something about Stanford University doing a study on social influence, talking about how people conform a lot more easily to peer norms rather than expert advice, just kind of going with the flow with what everybody else is doing rather than maybe actually listening to higher, more expert advice. Dan Penna said, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." That was another good quote too when I was looking through
No,
some of this
I
stuff.
use that one all the time. I mean, it is so true.
Yep. And then the third one I wanted to share is just how environment is more important in cases like this than discipline. An example would be, working out is a lot easier in a gym than it is in a living room. Success is a lot
Mhm.
easier around a circle of other winners. So again, just proximity, proximity,
That's great.
proximity.
Yeah.
And then just the last kind of segment I wanted just to talk about for a few minutes was about the internal, kind of more intentional relationships and how you can curate these. 3
Yeah.
circles basically. You have your inner circle, you have your growth circle, and you have your support circle. So if you think through all of your relationships that you have and how you kind of start to curate these and create these, proximity circles. Your inner circle is just daily influence. Maybe it's your partner, coworkers, maybe you have a business partner, or maybe some of your family members. A growth circle would be people that challenge your limits. An example would be maybe some friends at the gym that are pushing you to be better. Maybe you have a coach. And then support circle would be those who celebrate your wins and really walk with you in any of the setbacks you face. So just really
That's
thinking
great.
through, all 3 of those. Some people might fit into multiple circles. They don't have to be in just one of these, but it's just always good just to think through this as another way to identify who maybe is an anchor and who's more of a propeller.
I think it's so important to have someone that is above you. And when I say that, I'm talking about, they're in a higher place financially or with their career, or maybe they're more developed emotionally or a better communicator. Someone that is better developed, more successful than you. They're above you. I also think it's important to have someone that is below you. That way you can like help pull somebody up, but then you can also reach up, and then you
Mm-hmm.
and then you have kind of some of those supporters that are on the same level.
And if you are trying to find people maybe that are two steps above you and kind of reaching up, that example Ben shared, I guarantee there's still at ways that you can provide value to that circle, even if you're not maybe at their level yet. Whether that's just acts of service, meaning you're kind of, offering to help out with different things. That you can always find ways to provide value to anybody that you're interacting with. So just realizing that it's important to be intentional about that if you are trying to get into circles that maybe are above you slightly.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. I have a buddy of mine who just got into financial advising, and he called me just kind of out of the blue. And what was interesting about him, and I'll get a lot of solicitation calls just for various things, but he didn't call asking anything of me. He called just to give me a suggestion. I made a post that I was doing a flip on social media in Tulsa, Oklahoma with my brother. We're in the process of flipping a home. And so he just called me and he was like, you know what, have you thought of this tax strategy? He's like, you might want to consider this. If you structure things this way, you may, this may be something that you can, save several $1,000s. And so I was like, you know what? And then I was waiting for like him to ask me like, something else. And then that was it. I was like, you know what? I was like, I appreciate that. He just called and kind of dropped a nugget on me and kind of gave me something to think about. And so it really was just like he was giving me value and wasn't asking anything in return. I wasn't even asking anything from him, but he saw, I shared what I was doing, and he was like, you know what? I might have a suggestion for you. And he called me and like shared that with me. It was like a 5-minute call. And I was like, you know what? Thank you.
I feel like that could be an exercise that would really be impactful, is just, every day picking, one or two people to be very intentional about just trying to add some form of unsolicited value to them in one way or another, just doing that 5 days a week for a month and just seeing what transpires, what comes out of that.
I think a lot of big things would transpire. I mean, can you imagine if you got in the habit of just really being able to identify, I'm going to help this person this way? If you were just always on the lookout to really add value to others, your call would get answered every single time. And people, you would just be beloved.
Yeah, you might just be shoveling your elderly neighbor's driveway in a big snowstorm, and her son or daughter comes over to visit and finds out about it, and all of a sudden you have a new client. You never know.
And you're not doing these things to try and get, I think it's always important to point that out. You're doing these things to genuinely help people. The spirit of service.
Yeah, that's very important to realize. All right, guys, we'll close this one out. I'd like to share one final quote with you. Just a lot of these have a very similar theme to them. It's not about cutting people out. It's about creating space for the right ones to enter. So I think we'll leave you guys with that quote. Ben, do you have anything last to say before we wrap up this episode?
Yeah, I got a thought here. You're not meant to climb alone. Excuse me, you're not meant to climb alone. Every level requires a better crew. You just got to keep on moving forward, keep on rowing that boat forward with your crew. Sometimes you got to get out of the boat, get in a new one. Sometimes you got to find a new crew. You just got to keep moving forward.
Find a new crew. You can upgrade from that rowing to that propeller 55 horsepower engine.
Yeah. And then the motorboat, then the tugboat, then the cruise liner.
Before you know it, you'll be on the Midway.
Then the yacht. You got your own personal yacht.
Cool, guys. Well, hope you have a great rest of your week. Look forward to sharing a brand new episode next week with you. Pursuit of Progress Podcast. My name is Adam, here with Ben. We'll see you later.
We'll see you guys next week. God bless.